vairagya. So you will notice that terms like Krishna or Bhakti Yoga are directly, very rarely used in Bhagavatam. For example, you will find like Vasudeva or Janardana or Ishvara or Paramatma or so many other synonyms and so many other names of Krishna, but it's rarely Krishna is directly used. That's depending on the rasa that the speaker is experiencing at that time. Now in this verse you will see Bhakti Yoga is actually been directly used. Okay, is it nice now? Or resounding? Oh, okay, you got an echo. Okay. Is it better? A bit better. Close the door. Okay, can someone help? So, I was saying very rarely that we will see the words like Bhakti Yoga or Krishna directly used in the verses. There will be allusions with various other words. Like for example, Krishna uses the word Buddhi Yukta in variations, maybe more than 20 times, about 20, 22 times. But Bhakti, about maybe only 3 or 4 times. For example, Mam Chayavya Bicharena Bhakti Yogena Sevate. Or he says, Bhaktya Mama Abhijanati Yaman Yashashmitatvata. Or Bhaktya Tenanya Shakyo Ameva Vidorjana Nattum Dashtum Chatatve. So Bhakti very rarely uses, most of the times he's alluding with various other variations. And it's important to do that because everybody has different propensities. So in this word, Bhakti Yoga has been directly used. Yeah? So we might want to just discuss that a little bit. What happens, obviously when you come to my Bhagavatam discussions, you might already expect that I'm going to do some theology. Yeah? So I'm going to do some theology. Is that okay? Nothing wrong with doing some theology in Bhagavatam classes. So theology, the word theology comes from 2 words. Theos is God in Greek. Logos comes from logos. Logi comes from logos, and logos is from Latin. So theo, God, and Latin word logos, the dharma, the reasoning of God, is theology. So understanding the dharma of God is theology. So Bhagavatam. So it's straightforward, yeah? So Bhakti Yoga, what happens historically, from the history of religions, what we notice is that human mind is programmed to move into a higher class. Wherever we are, we try to move into a higher class. That's our propensity. If you go to the movies, people are always trying to find out what's that gold class. You know, what kind of awards we need to get to the gold class. Or if you go to sports event, you're always trying to go, oh, who's sitting on those corporate boxes? One day I'll be on that glass box. Or if you're in the plane, it's depressing when you're walking through all these business classes and finally where you end up will be, at least me, and we end up in the economic class and I'm going, someone there will be wishing, I wish I was there, up there. So the human mind is programmed to always achieve a higher kind of class. That's how it is programmed. So from the religious history, what happens is when someone comes to the religion also, that human force, that tendency to move into a higher class, like a gold class, automatically kinds of kicks in without being conscious about it. And there is a tendency in the religions which religions start to act a little bit more privileged, like we are privileged people, we have the higher truth. You know, we have the gospel, the 4 gospels. Some people say, I have the gospel. Some people will say, I have the holy book. Or everybody thinks they always have the higher truth. This is common. I've lived with Muslims, I've lived with Christians, I lived with Jews, I lived with Orthodox when I was in my student years. And everybody says that their truth is the highest. It's not like amazing thing. Everybody thinks that their truth are highest. And I've also been involved in their discussions when they're discussing in them, they always look down upon someone else. And particularly, all the three major Abrahamic religions really look down upon Hindus because of the idol worship and all that. And Hindus have their own reasons to look down upon others. So the reason this is because we are programmed to feel ourselves in a higher class. It's a psychological thing. That's what happens. So now how do we know that what Bhakti Yoga is actually high? Despite of all that I spoke, despite of all the religions I mentioned, despite of all the higher truths that are available, still Bhakti Yoga is high. Now I'm starting to sound like a Hare Krishna fanatic or something. But it is. Now how do we know that? How can we, okay, it's called, these kind of questions are called epistemology. Anybody heard of epistemology before? Anybody here? So epistemology, thank you. Epistemology is the science of knowledge. How do you know you know? How do you know you're advancing? How do you know you have the highest truth? How do you know you are living that knowledge? How do you know Krishna is actually the higher God, highest God, supreme God? So these kind of questions fall into a category in theology called epistemology in philosophy. Episteme comes from Greek, knowledge. Ology says, how do you reason to that? So how do we do that? This is how we do it. The epistemology of Bhakti Yoga is state-specific. I'll explain to you what it is. Epistemology of Bhakti Yoga, how we know that we are advanced, how we know someone is advanced, how we know that we are moving up, how we know that we are not moving down, is by our exemplary behavior. Is by our exemplary character. Is when people see how we are representations of God in front of them. We are representing God in His widest, broadest heart. When people see that in the society, we actually representing Krishna with that kind of broad heart, with that kind of broad compassion, with that kind of broad mind. When people see that, we don't have to shout at them that we have the highest truth. They will know. We don't have to argue for 30 minutes trying to explain how Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja is the highest truth, or Manmana Bhavat Bhakto Madhyajimam Namas, that's the highest truth, or Ya ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, that's the highest truth. They don't have to fight like that. When people see an exemplary character displayed by a person, Shama, Dama, Tapa, Shocham, Shanti, Marjam, Evacha. So when people see the character, when people can notice the character, then there's no need for us to argue. Then there's no need to convert someone, proselytize. You heard this word, proselytization? Conversions. There's no need to do that. Because just by our exemplary behavior, just by the way we stand, just by the way we talk, just by the way we respond, people will say, that's the highest religion. There's no need for you to stand on the roads and argue until the cows come home. There's no need to do that. So that's the epistemology, how you're advancing, how Krishna is revealing to you is state-specific. State-specific in the sense that the consciousness, the behavior, the character, the state of our characters, the state of our behaviors, the state of our consciousness. So that's Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is where we're representing Krishna. We become the emblems of representations of Krishna's love, Krishna's dharma, Krishna's bhakti. When we do that, we don't need to worry about resources. I'm not saying some theoretical knowledge, or I'm not giving you some, throwing at your, just laying out some abstract knowledge that doesn't apply practically. No. We don't need to so get hyper concerned about finances. We don't need to get hyper concerned about resources, because what happens is when people see that you are in a mission and you are representing the truth of that mission, resources and money will automatically come. There is no need to chase resources. There's no need to strategize for, there's no need to worry. There's no need to be concerned. When people see on the road, when people see on the streets, when the people see out there, you speak, you respond, you talk. They see you as a representation, as a representation of a mission of Krishna, of God, then they'll pour their finances at you. We don't need to, I'm talking from my personal experiences. I was a grihastha. I worked for a bank for a long time, more than 2 decades. Yeah, I can honestly say I never had to worry about money. So what I'm trying to say is money is not a problem. Resources is not a problem. When you're a mission, people will throw out. You're walking and people will lay out their wealth. Because you're representing a mission. They can see your character. That's epistemology. That's the epistemology of Bhakti Yoga. We don't need to worry about how much enjoyment did we get, how much materially enjoy we get, how much did we, I don't know, what are the popular things people do these days? Cruises. So many things that are going. But it's kind of an automatic, it's like an automatic resources backing you. It happens like that. So we're going to have to religions. We're actually not a religion. I'm very hesitant to call ourselves a religion. We're actually a consciousness movement. I'm very hesitant to call ourselves a religion. We are a movement of consciousness. So when we represent that, when people see that, that's Bhakti Yoga. That's epistemology of Bhakti Yoga. That's Jnana. So Jnana Vairagya Yuktena Bhakti Yogena Yogina. So Jnana, Krishna explains Jnana in 13th chapter. He says, Adhyatma Jnana Nityatvam Tattva Jnana Radhakshanam Etad Jnanam iti proktam Agnanam Yat Tatonyata. From my point of view, please believe me, from my point of view, Krishna is saying, Adhyatma Jnana Nityatvam. All the exposure in the world, all the experience of the world, all the fantasies of the mind can be completely satisfied by understanding that you are a conscious entity which is never bound. When you know that you have that kind of resources at your disposal, as an Atma, as a conscious entity, when you know you have that kind of a ticket to go everywhere on this planetary systems with spiritual, including spiritual worlds, then that gives you assurance. Then we don't need to do any separate efforts and burn out our engines, trying to expose, trying to experience, trying to. So that's is it too low or too loud? Too close. Okay. Better? Okay. So that's, I just kind of wanted to give you a little introduction. That's Jnana Vairagya Yuktena. That's Jnana. Understanding your soul, falling in, self-caring yourself, working for your own benefit. That's Krishna is saying Jnana. Understanding your relationship with Krishna. These are all Jnana. Not going into the chaser's war and being able to name all the capital cities in the world. How many Oscars did, Halle Berry win, or how many Oscars did Tom Cruise win, or Tom Hanks win, or that's not knowledge. It's okay to gather some information if it's beneficial. But jnana is understanding you as an atma, as a soul, already accomplished. Access to any kind of ticket to any part of this universe. Access to any kind of pleasures. That's jnana. When you get that kind of jnana, when you understand that kind of jnana, that original constitutional position as atma, we don't have to do a separate endeavor for detachment. Detachment is automatically there. The reason we can't find detachment in this world is because we don't understand, we don't have a grip that there's actually life after. There's a whole world outside this material body. We're extremely petrified that there's actually whole life outside this body. So once that conviction comes, once you see that, once you understand that, there's actually a life outside this body much more enhanced, much more cognitive, much more blissful, much more being. When you see that, then the grip on this current detachments, on this current body slackens, like loses. Then the detachment is automatic. You don't have to try for it. It's automatic. You're automatically working for a mission. You're automatically working for others' welfare. Once you get that conviction, once you see a life outside this body, which is much more enhanced, much more complete, then the detachment, you don't have to work separately. It automatically releases. Boom. Boom. It's like, boom. Oh, wow. Actually, wow. Wow. That's freedom. It's like, I love it. And I don't want to leave this. So that's jnana and vairagya. Then bhakti yoga is possible. Then we don't have any interruptions. So that's how bhakti yoga is possible. Doesn't make sense, or did I lose you completely in my theology? So everybody can keep claiming that they have the truth. They can hold a flag and go around the world and conquer. What is Omar, the second caliph? He conquered 500 million miles, spreading his religion. Omar was the second caliph. And the third caliph about 6 million miles or something there. 600,000 miles. Third caliph. So we don't have to do that and take the Vijaya Dhwaja and go and convert people. People just see us, people look at us, and they automatically join you. They automatically provide for your cause. So we have to find a way to go out there and meet people and let them grow in their positions rather than trying to culturally colonize them, culturally convert them. Sthane shrutigata tanuvan manobhi. Sthane sthita shrutigata tanuvan manobhi. Means we let people to gradually develop in their own positions. We don't need to force them by conversions. Let people gradually cultivate in their own position. Sthane sthita shrutigata tanuvan manobhi. Yo prayaso jitadijayasya pitrayastra lokyam. Then you can win the 3 worlds. Trayad Trilokyam. The 3 worlds, 3 planetary systems are already victorious. You already got victory over the 3 worlds by that. So that's Bhakti Yoga. We don't have to proselytize people. We don't have to convert people, push them into subtle cultural colonization. We don't have to do. Let them develop in their own places. Chant Hare Krishna, follow all the things that's supposed to be for your own conscious development, ahimsa, cleanliness. It's universal principles. By cleanliness, by himsa, by maintaining your vows, by being determined, just stay in your places and develop. Yes, something interesting happened yesterday. I'll give you a story. One of our Harinam boys, he used to come to our Harinam for a long time. And I used to be in that Harinam in the city for quite some time myself. All of a sudden, one day he showed up in Hornsby. And he was with these born-again Christians. Oh, oh, how are you going, brother? I won't name him. I said, how are you going, brother? And he said, yeah, I'm good. I've joined the Christians now. Okay. Well, that suits you. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, sure. And then he used to come to me and kind of, dig into me and try to tell me that Christianity is better and I should leave Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. Oh my God. I couldn't do that. Anyway, he used to try that. And he did a few encounters and all that. So something happened recently. He comes to me back again. And this time, every time I used to say to him, if you want to be a Christian, no problem, but be a good Christian. Have you read your Ecclesiastic? Have you read your Job? Have you read your Matthew's Gospel? Have you read your Psalms? Have you read your Proverbs? No. So you haven't read Bible? No. So what are you doing? You haven't read Gita here. You haven't read Bible there. So what are you doing? Oh, wow. Wow, that's interesting point. So yeah, recently he came to me with a Bible this time. So he showed me the Bible, like just to show me that I'm reading now. I said, oh, that's very good. So I took the Bible and I was just going through the papers. And I just showed him some interesting points from Zechariah, Elijah, the prophets, and I just showed him some from John's Gospel. I said, that's interesting. And I showed this, I find these things interesting. Guess what? I just heard he was back in the temple with a full can of milk, doing full dandavats here in the temple yesterday, this morning. Isn't that interesting? I didn't go to him and said, you stupid, what are you doing? You're leaving Bhagavad Gita and going to the Bible or something. I didn't say anything. I said, fantastic. If you want to be a good Christian, read it and follow it correctly. And I showed him some interesting points in the Bible. And apparently, he was here for Mangalarti with a full gallon of milk. And he was back in. And he gave me a hug yesterday. Hare Krishna Prabhu gave me a big hug to me. Hare Krishna Prabhu. And then he's back in. Haribo. So, we need to be careful with our language when we are out there. We don't need to treat people with these karmi words and, rascals and karmis. And, no, we don't need. Prabhupada uses that in his Bhagavatam. Prabhupada can do that because he's an acharya. But that doesn't mean we can follow Prabhupada. We don't imitate Prabhupada. We can't use his words over other people. Like they are karmis, we are like, devotees, look at my garland. No, we don't do karmis. Another story, I'll just quickly, sorry, today is going to be the day of stories. So I knocked someone's door the other day. And someone opens the door. As soon as he sees me, he says, Prabhu, please come here. I said, how do you know to call me Prabhu? Oh, I used to come to you people. Oh, really? So what happened? My wife and I, we all went and we were there for a couple of months and I don't know who they are, I don't know who they met, I haven't asked any questions. But in first 24 hours, they got about 24,000 rules. Like just shoved up under their throat. This rule, that rule, that rule, this rule. What you're doing is Maya, this is Kali, this is this. Or you cook like this, you cook like this, you do this, you do. And the rules and the rules and the rules and the rules and the rules. His wife had a post-traumatic PTSD case, post-traumatic stress disorder. And they left, and this guy still has some sympathy for us. He opens the door, he makes me sit there, and he's calling his wife, hey, come here, the Hare Krishna's here. She didn't want to even come down and see my face. She didn't want to step 10 steps down and see my face. Because she has this trauma. The amount of rules that they shoved in her throat. And she's traumatic. Like all these karmis, you are sinful, you did sins, sarva dharman parityajya, mamekam sharanam, then your sins will be, then what are you doing, how are you cooking, and all these rules. And that's it, she got a PTSD case and she's gone. So what we're trying to say is, Anyway, we had a little chat and he took the books and eventually she came down and we had a talk. And it looks like they're a little bit more familiar now. So what we're trying to say is we're going to have to represent Bhakti Yoga. We're going to have to show the world this is the time. Everybody has got books now there. Most of them. 50% out there, if you show them books, they've already got the Bhagavad Gita. 50% out there. Am I right? Am I yes or a yes? They have yes or a yes? Everybody got Bhagavad Gita. So they all have Gitas. Now we have to do is represent this Krishna consciousness. Represent this movement. Represent the qualities. Show them a missionary attitude. Once we show a missionary attitude, once we represent the right religion, once we represent Krishna's compassion and his broadness, then there's no problem with resources, there's no problem with wealth, there's no problem with money. It will come automatically follow you. Does it make sense? Did I lose you or did I challenge you, or does it something sounds like out of the vault? Is it okay? Okay, so take shelter. Bhakti yogena yogina kshemaya padamulam me pravishyanti akuto bhayam. Just one more point I wanted to discuss before, because it looks like this fear factor has been there in 3 or 4 verses now. This fear factor is going on in 3 or 4 verses. Is it okay if I quickly discuss that fear factor? So, if you see in the previous words, Krishna is saying, Kapila Muni is saying, you might have noticed that I've got a particular affiliation and affection for Kapila Muni and Sankhya. But actually I have 4 times more affection for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because of his Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva. I'm actually composing a book on that. So I love Kapila Muni and his Sankhya, but I love 4 times more Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva and Swata Pramana and all that. We'll do that later. But so in the last verse, in the last 2 verses, there is a theme of fear. So the verse before, I want to just put this in context. The terrible fear of birth and death can never be forsaken by anyone who resorts to any shelter than myself. So number 1. In 2 verses previous, he was saying, the terrible fear of birth and death can never be forsaken by anyone who resorts to my shelter. Then in the next verse, he's saying, Mad bhayad vati vatoyam, it is because of my supremacy that the wind blows. Out of fear of me, the sun shines. The Lord of cloud Indra sends showers out of fear of me. The fire burns out of me. And the death goes about taking its toll out of fear of me. So there's a lot of fear going on. I wanted to just say, like, is God running this world with fear? Is that how he's running this world? We all supposed to be fearing about God? Isn't that a breach of free will? If I put a gun to your head and say, go and bring your wage and give it to me, is that an act of free will? So here God is saying that because of my fear, the whole universe is functioning. Does that mean God is instilling fear in us? And does that mean we have to fear God? If you're fearing God, then does that mean, if you're fearing God, then how is that not a breach of free will? So how do you reconcile this? So when you have problems in Bhagavatam, you resort to Bhagavad Gita, and when you can't understand Bhagavad Gita, you resort to Bhagavatam. That's how these things work. So I'll give you an interesting story. The same people that Krishna is mentioning, Kapila Muni is mentioning, for example, Vayoyam, Vati Vayoyam, the wind god fears me. The same wind god's son, Bhima, was Krishna's best friend. Suryas tapati madbhayat, Varshat Indros dahati agni, Varshat Indro, the same Indra that Krishna is saying fears him, his son is Krishna's best friend, Arjuna. Yama mrityuscharati madbhayat, he's saying the death god who takes toll on our death the death god fears me, but the death god's son, Yamadharmaraja Yudhishthira, is Krishna's best friend. So how can it be true? How can it not true, but how can we understand this paradox? On one hand, Krishna is saying, these all people fear me, all the universe is running to fear me. On the other hand, Krishna is hanging out with their sons like buddies. To the point that Arjuna in 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita actually asks for forgiveness. Saketi matva prasavam yaduktam. Hey Krishna, hey Yadava, hey Saketi. Ajanata mahimanam tavedam maya pramana pranena vapi. Yachava hasartam asatkrutosi. Vihara shayyasana bhojaneshu. Tatskshama yetum aham prameyam. Ekota vapyat shatu tat samaksham. So he says, I've been calling you, hey Krishna, hey Yadava, like buddy. I lied down with you in the parks. I was going out with you. I was taking you familiar. So the same people that Krishna is saying, fear me, these sons were hanging out with him like buddies in Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita. So how do you reconcile this paradox? How do we reconcile this paradox? It's a paradox. Any ideas? Good point. That's a good point. But actually, I can take that to the next level. Because Krishna had affection to them even before they met them. Because Krishna first saw them in the Draupadi Sayamvara, he hadn't even met them. And he already had affection for them. He was showing to Baldev that there are those 5 Pandavas, see? That's the first time they had seen him. He had seen them. The point is, when Krishna speaks these kind of verses that everybody is fearing, if you see the context of previous words, it's not actually trying to tell people, fear me. It's actually giving you assurance that you don't need to fear them because they are under my control. It's not showing that everybody fears me, but it's giving devotees an assurance that you don't need to fear because everybody else is taken care of. It's an assurance word. You don't need to worry about your shelter. You don't need to worry about, when he's saying Sarvadharman Parityaja, you don't need to worry about your shelter because I can be your shelter. You don't need to worry about the fears of these worlds. You don't need to worry about the atrocities, or maybe the better word is shocks or traumas of this world, because I will take care of you. These people are taken care of already. So it's an assurance from God. That's what God is trying to establish. He's not trying to instill fear, because if you keep fearing God, how are we going to act in a harmonious way, and how are we going to use our free will to love God? Say if my wife came to me, or I went to my wife one day and I said, I don't really love you, but I was forced, and my parents had asked me that if I didn't marry you, I wasn't going to get any inheritance. So I just pretended to love you. I feared my parents and I loved you. Bad news. How would that go? If I went to my wife and I said, or I went to my daughter and I said, Meera, I just loved you because your mom really was on my case. Otherwise, it's okay. Or I went to my wife and said, I love you because I was afraid of losing some inheritance. How would my rest of the day go with my wife? No good. Bad news. So, God is not instilling fear in us. God is trying to give assurance that you don't need to fear the calamities and traumas of this world because these people have already been taken care. So don't fear God unless you are envious. Unless you are envious of God, unless you are envious of other people, unless you hate other people or cause harm to other people, working against other people's welfare, that's when you fear. Otherwise, if you're on a sattvic life, practicing a devotional, broad-minded, a jnana-based life, a bhakti yoga-based life, there's no need to fear God. I just thought I'll give that some clarity there. Does that make sense? About the fear part? And there's another thing God is trying to establish. When God says that these gods fear me, that gods fear me, these gods fear me, what God is trying to do is establish what's called monotheism. Everybody understands monotheism? Polytheism, monotheism? Yeah? So monotheism is where people have one God. Polytheism is where there is multiple gods. 330 crores or something. That's what it is said in India. So polytheism, when Krishna says, and he uses verses like everything is taken care of and all the gods fear me, he's actually establishing his supremacy. He's establishing what's called monotheism. And it's very important to establish monotheism because it's extremely important. And you will know this if anybody has read any little bit of Homer or Homer's Iliad or Odyssey, Trojan Wars. Anybody here? So I'll give you an example of, for example, Trojans and in the Odyssey and the Iliad that Homer wrote. Plato was a big critic of Homer. And the reason he was a big critic of Homer is because Homer has gods who was behaving childishly. Like, for example, they had like Zeus, they had like Aphrodite, Apollo for sun, and they had the sea goddesses, Zeus, Aphrodite, Apollo, Eros for Kamadev. So they had thousands and thousands of gods, and everybody used to go and do sacrifices. So there comes a point in this Trojan War, this is in the Iliad, the Odyssey. There comes a point when the Agamemnon, the Greek emperor who wanted to take sovereignty and control of that whole region, finally there's one kingdom that was never touched. It was never conquered. So Agamemnon had this fierce desire to conquer this Trojan, the city of Troy. You might have heard this, city of Troy. So he's going, but when he's going, he has like about 1,000 ships and he's going towards the Trojans. But the sea is very, very choppy and rough. And what he has to do is he cannot cross unless the sea calms down. And one of his priests comes and says, the only way you're going to calm the seas down is giving a human sacrifice to the sea. And he says, so what human sacrifice should I give? And he says, give something very close to your heart. And Agamemnon says, the closest thing to my heart is my daughter. He says, there you go. So before entering into the sea, he actually brings his daughter, slits her throat, and sprinkles the blood on the sacrifice. And the way I see it was, I actually saw the sea was discouraging him to go towards that. But he didn't want to listen. So he was so anxious and so ambitious to destroy Troy, he actually slaughters his daughter for the goddess. So these kinds of things, this is in the Trojan War, this is in the Odyssey, I'm not making this story up. It's everywhere. It's everywhere in the Mediterranean scriptures. Using God, Baal worship, for example. That's where the whole Old Testament starts. Where people would go and throw their children in the fire for the happiness for glorifying Baal. So when these kinds of things happened, the polytheism had to be stopped. And to stop the polytheism, to stop it, all this line of prophets would come and vigorously go on monotheism, and they established one God. But that went too extreme. That goes to a point where now everybody looks down upon, like, we have a living God, you have a dead God. Do you get that from the born-again Christians when you're distributing books? You get that? When you meet a Christian, that's the first thing they say. We have living gods, you worship the dead gods. Our God can beat up your God. I am a jealous God. If you go and, you bow down under the Babylonians, God, I'm going to bring my wrath. I'm going to burn you in hell, and I'll just wake you up to burn you again. I'm the jealous God. So, one, we have this extreme where human sacrifices goes on, anything goes on in the name of polytheism. And when you have this other extreme where in the name of monotheism, people are going to another extreme saying that we only have the right God, you all have dead gods, and this is another extreme. So to break these kind of paradoxes, these kind of extremes, what God does is speak these kind of verses to establish monotheism. So these kind of fear verses are done for two reasons. One reason is to give assurance for us that we are taken care of. If we are sincere, our finances are taken care of. If we are sincere, the opportunities will come. If we represent a mission, opportunities will arise. Ananyas chintayanto mam. Please don't worry, I'll take care of it. So it's an assurance verses when you see these kind of fear verses. And another angle for it is, another way to understand it, is also that God is trying to establish monotheism. And also if you see Bhagavad Gita, nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dhati pavaka, na chainam kledayanti apo, na susheti maruta. All these gods, the fire gods, the sun gods, or the rain gods, your soul can never be cut to pieces by them. So this is how we understand the fear factor when it comes to Bhakti Yoga. As long as the envy is the deal breaker, enviousness is the deal breaker. In spiritual world, envy is the deal breaker. Because in spiritual world, people are not worried about class, people are worried about not becoming heroes, people are worried about making heroes. I don't need to worry about becoming a hero. I should be more worried about making heroes. That's spiritual world. In the spiritual world, you're asked to come to the center and you run away and you're hiding behind some kunj at a pond and you're just going Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. And you're making everybody heroes, but you never seen. And guess what happens? Krishna comes to you. Krishna goes to the gopis. Because they don't want to be in the center, they're going away, nobody wants to be the center. I don't need to be a hero. But what I can do is I can make heroes. Make our children heroes. Make our student heroes. Make our friends heroes. Make our wives heroes. Make our daughters heroes. We don't need to be heroes. That's spiritual world. But when we practice that kind of mood in here, then what does this become? When you practice that mood here, what does this become? This becomes spiritual world. So in this vigor of going back to Godhead, we can't forget that we have to be gentlemen in this world. We are so worried about going back to Godhead. We are so worried about, catching that flight with the blue princess. We forget that we have to be gentlemen here. So we have to be gentlemen. When we do the Bhakti Yoga, when we are practicing the spiritual technology, we are making heroes and not trying to be heroes. We are already in the spiritual world. We don't need to worry about going into the spiritual world. I promise you, you don't have to wait until you die to go to the spiritual world. I promise. You don't have to wait until you die to go to the spiritual world. You can be in the spiritual world now, in this body, now, in this world. Because material world has restrictions. Spiritual world doesn't have restrictions. It can come to us here. Aren't we in a spiritual world here? Material world cannot go into the spiritual world. But spiritual world doesn't have any restrictions. It can come to us here. So we don't have to, there's a myth, usually in the religious people's heads, that we have to die, or, some people have this mentality of blowing up things, or, go and blow something up and you'll go to the heaven, or we don't have to die to go to the spiritual world. You can be in spiritual world while you're alive and well here right now. Does that sound like a good assurance? Why do we have to wait? There's no need to wait. So let's give this to everybody. Let's give this opportunity to everybody. Let's not discriminate anybody as rascals or karmis or mayas or kalyugas. Let's not discriminate anybody like that. Children or lokas or women or yavanas or malachas. Let's give this to everybody. Yare dekho tare ka ho Krishna upadesh. Hamara agna hoye. Tara desh. Wherever you are, give this Krishna consciousness to everybody. It's not about converting, it's not about proselytizing. They see you, they see your exemplary character, they see your compassion. The way we are looked upon now, honestly, I've been walking maybe over a decade, I've been walking on the streets, I've knocked, I don't know, anyway. Let's be honest, the way we are looked upon as like some Hindus. Some part of Hindus, some kind of sect in Hindus. But it is our job to clarify this confusion, to show that this is not some Hindu religion, this is actually a consciousness science. And this is applicable to everybody. Ministers can become Krishna conscious, military men can become Krishna conscious, tradies can become Krishna conscious, and teachers can become Krishna conscious. What are the 4 groups I just mentioned? Military men, business, yeah? So, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Shudra, Vaishya. So we don't, anybody, sthane stita shrutigatan tanuvan manobhi, yo prayaso jitajjay sapitrai stalaukyam. Let them be in their positions. Let's just give pure spiritual science, Krishna consciousness. Chant Hare Krishna, get the wisdom of Bhakti Yoga, see please let us help you. We are happy for you to relate to us. We don't have to be unrelatable. They come to us and they don't know what in the God's planet we're doing. What are you talking about? Like, what is this? So we need to talk the language that people are talking these days. We need to update ourselves. We need to upgrade ourselves. This is a universal movement. I was listening to a lecture recently about someone talking about how there is actually a mention of temple in the Bhagavad Gita and we should all build temples. And I'm saying, I love the idea of temple. That's where I met Krishna and I love it. I love dancing, I love the aartis, I love the temples, I love the atmosphere. I like the fact that I can actually come here and meet you all, associate with you all. It really makes my day. I'm serious. Just coming and seeing you guys, it really does. It makes my day. But but this person was kind of carving up a temple out of Bhagavad Gita. And he said, why do we have to do that? Krishna doesn't say temple, but there is some indirect, insidious, and he went on for an hour and a half or 2 hours. And I just asked him, why can't we just provide Bhagavad Gita on the strength of Bhagavad Gita? It's speaking to the whole universe. It's speaking to the upper planetary systems, Bhagavad Gita, because he spoke to Vivaswan. It's speaking to the middle planetary systems, which is us, in Kurukshetra. It's spoken to in the lower planetary systems to Bali Maharaj and Yamadharmaraj. So we don't need to carve out any more meanings out of Bhagavad Gita than a pure Krishna consciousness, a consciousness science. It is a science of consciousness. And we present this Krishna consciousness, we present this science, we present the sociology. Yukta hara viharasya yukta chestasya karmasu. Please live a balanced life. Please look after yourself. Take care of yourself. Manage your life. Manage your finances. Look after your kids. Put them in nice schools. Take care of your friends. Take care of your brahmachari friends. Take care of your grhastha friends. Speak with affection. Everything, that's what Bhagavad Gita is saying. So it's not some kind of Hindu sect. That's what people, at least people now think. The 5.4 million people in Sydney. Last time I checked. How many are we? Is there a potential that more people can be Krishna conscious? Yes or yes? True or true? 5.4 million people out there, and how many of us? $17. Of course, there's some people listening in online. There's 5.4 million people, ladies and gentlemen, children and adults, bhaiyo behno, sajjano, brothers and sisters, young and old. Please, I'm going to go this slow now. There's 5.4 million people in Sydney. Do we see the potential? So how are we going to do this now? Lose our sleep? Maybe. I can't sleep well in summer anyway. So I struggle. Is that just me or all of you? Can't sleep in summer. Just like struggle. Anyway. So 5.4 million people, and how many of us? Do we have some thinking to do? Do we have some shoulders to put together? Is there a potential to expand our love? Is there a potential to expand our compassion? Ladies and gentlemen, bhaiyo aur behno, sajjano, young and old, sisters and brothers, please take note of this. 5.4 million people. So we have some job to do. We have to represent this. We have to become exemplary characters. We have to be that representation of God for people. God's compassion, God's broad-heartedness, God's broad-mindedness. When that happens, you don't need to worry about resources. You don't need to worry about money. I'm talking from my personal experience. I'm just one single man. I'm only one single person. If we all remember if all of us come together and experience this, all of us together, come together, do this as a mission. Imagine the miracle that is possible. Represent this in front of people. Show this God's compassion. Is that okay, or did I completely bore you to death? Okay, I might read the purport because I don't want you to go and ask for refunds. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, says in Bhagavad Gita that the natural laws being enacted are correct in all activities because of his superintendence. No one should think that nature is working automatically without superintendence. The Vedic literature says that the clouds are controlled by the demigod Indra. Heat is Zeus in Greek. Heat is distributed by the sun god Apollo in Greek. Oh, sorry. 44. Oh, sorry. 44, isn't it? 43. One who actually wants to be liberated from the entanglement of... Thank you. One who actually wants to be liberated from the entanglement of this material world and go back to Godhead is actually a mystic yogi. The words explicitly used here are yuktena bhakti yogena. Those yogis are mystics who engage in devotional service as the first-class yogis. The first-class yogis, as described in Bhagavad Gita, are those who are constantly thinking of the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. These yogis are not without knowledge and renunciation. We spoke about that. To become a Bhakti Yogi means to automatically attain knowledge and renunciation. That is the consequent result of Bhakti Yoga. We spoke about that too. In Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 2nd chapter, it is also confirmed that one who engages in devotional service of Vasudeva, Krishna, has complete transcendental knowledge and renunciation. We spoke about that. And there is no explanation of these attainments. Ahoituki, without reason, they come. Even if a person is completely illiterate, the transcendental knowledge of the scriptures is revealed unto him simply because of his engagement in devotional service. That is also stated in the Vedic literature. To anyone who has full faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the scriptures, all the import of the Vedic literature is revealed, who does not have to seek separately. He does not have to seek separately. The yogis who engage in devotional service are full in knowledge and renunciation. If there is a lack of knowledge and renunciation, it is to be understood that one is not in full devotional service. The conclusion is that one cannot be sure of entrance into the spiritual realm in either the impersonal Brahmajyoti effulgence or the Lord of the Vaikuntha planet within that Brahman effulgency, unless he surrendered unto the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. The surrendered souls are called Akuto Bhaya. They are doubtless and fearless, and their entrance into the spiritual kingdom is guaranteed. So, the moral of the story is, please don't wait until we die to go to the spiritual world. We can be in the spiritual world here, right now, on this planet. It's just a matter of representing Krishna's love and giving Krishna to others. When you give Krishna to others, Krishna comes to you. Like, Krishna, go, Krishna. Go to him, go to her. Go to him. He's a good singer. He knows a lot. He's got a lot of knowledge. Go to him, Krishna. But Krishna comes to us. You go to spiritual world, you don't need to be a hero. You make heroes. You go and hide under a little pond, somewhere under a tree, and Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, and Krishna comes to you. So that's Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is not about Bhakti Yoga is not about becoming heroes. Bhakti Yoga is about making heroes. Thank you very much. Any comments, questions, corrections? Sorry, if it's a little boring because of all my theology, I throw a lot of theology into you. Sorry about that. But any questions? Yes, Ian Prabhu. Bhakta Ian Prabhu. If he has an inclination, if he's a religious person, if he has an inclination, because if people don't know that there is a world outside this world, if all they think is their bodies, then it's a little hard. But if they have some inclination and says, talks about like what to do and things like that,